r/ask Reddit. What is the most useless fact you know? Eels actually have two jaws. The first being like a normal jaw, the second being hidden in their throat. The secondary jaw lunges forward when the eel bites down on prey, bites down on the piece within the mouth and bites a chunk out of it, pulling it down the throat. Think about the alien in the movie Alien. The secondary mini-mouth they use is based off an eel's anatomy. Foot tickling for sexual arousal was a tradition in the Muscovite palaces and courts for centuries. Catherine the Great and Anna Ivanovna were ardent participants. Ticklers sang naughty ballads and told lewd stories whilst tickling their ladies' feet, working their mistresses up into an erotic frenzy with which to meet their husbands or partners. Wild ducks have penises up to 40 centimeters in length. The penis is curly like a pig's tail and can either be turning clockwise or counterclockwise. When a male duck has found a partner, the female duck's internal reproduction organs will automatically start to twist in the same direction as the male's, like a lock that adjusts to the shape of a key. You will be wondering why. Well, that's because wild ducks are notorious for rape. No species of birds has as many rapes as wild ducks. The matching of the curls of the reproductory organs is a primary defense mechanism for the rapes. Other defense mechanisms include a sperm lock. When unwanted sperm enters the female, she can guide it away from het egg cells. Oh, and there are about 3 female births for every male birth. That's because so many female ducks get killed during these rapes. Ducks are vile. My first ever Reddit post, woohoo. I don't remember what causes it, but if you lay down with your head on someone else's stomach, who is also lay down, and they laugh, it'll also make you laugh. I tried this with a small group of friends a good few years ago, and we made a human square of 4 people. All of us lay down with our heads on each other's stomachs. As soon as one person started to laugh, none of us could stop, until we eventually moved. Was a fun little childhood thing. The thought of this makes me laugh. I doubt anybody will see this response by this point in time, but I'll post it anyway, because it is very far from useful. The first person to pay their income tax under the Revenue Act of 1913 was the then Vice President, Thomas Marshall. He had long been a proponent of reinstating an income tax in the United States as a way to raise revenue rather than relying on tariffs, and shortly before Woodrow Wilson became president, the 16th Amendment was ratified, which specified that the federal government could levy a tax on income. The Revenue Act of 1913 wasn't the first income tax in the United States, but it was the first such tax that was instituted after the ratification of this amendment. Thomas Marshall had spent the bulk of his career advocating for fairer taxation, so he was very happy when an income tax was enacted. Once it went into effect, he inquired with the eyes about what he would owe and wrote them out a check for the amount due, making him the first person in the United States to pay his income tax. Most states don't issue a driver's license, and that when you're asked for your driver's license if you're behind the wheel, the task is impossible. The sentence structure is such that it would be like asking someone to pluck their chicken's feathers. If you don't have a chicken, then the request is stupid. The double ownership of the phrase, your driver's license, implies that you own or have a separate driver that is not yourself, and that the demand is for their license, not yours. The your driver shows that you own the driver. Driver's license shows that the driver, which you own, owns the license separately. It is a useless fact due to people ignoring the plain English reading of the law. If people followed the plain English reading, it would not be a useless fact. In 1941, Heinz Ketchup signed an endorsement deal with New York Yankees superstar Joe DiMaggio. This season, DiMaggio had his famous hitting streak, and given that Heinz is famous for their 57 varieties, they agreed to make a special Joe DiMaggio bottle of ketchup once DiMaggio reached his 57th game of his hitting streak. The streak ended at 56 games. French New Wave filmmaker Eric Romer used to plan so far ahead of time that he went to location 1 year before he shot Claire's knee, decided that he wanted a specific shot to have more of a specific color, bought bags of seeds for a flower of that specific color he wanted, and then planted an entire field of flowers on the mountain he was shooting. Trespassing, of course. When he returned for the spring of next year, the entire field was blooming. He got his shot, and no one in the community knew how or why these flowers had suddenly sprung up on their property. Tiger shark embryos fight to the death inside the womb. Tiger sharks typically always birth 2 babies and they will have the same father. This basically means the embryos somehow know if their embryo brothers or sisters share the same genes. The biggest embryo typically eats all the other embryos, except his brothers or sisters who have the same dad. They will start with as many as 12 embryos and end with only 2. In 2022 you'll be able to see 2 stars collide. The stars are too dim to see with the naked eye, but astronomers have been watching them slowly spiral closer and closer together. Their collision will cause a giant explosion, also known as a red nova, which will then fizzle out into a dimmer, but permanently visible, addition to the night sky. Ketamine was used out during Vietnam War because it didn't require a medic to give it to you. Your buddy can inject you with it. That's why it was called the buddy drug, and you just walk out of the battlefield. In comparison, morphine can cause respiratory depression, requires a medic to administer the correct amount in people to help you get out of the battlefield. This is why vets like to use it on animals. There is a very low chance in overdosing compared to morphine. The reason a giraffe brain doesn't explode due to high blood pressure when it bends down is because it has a gland in its neck to regulate said blood pressure. Also, the reason homing pigeons can always find their way home is because they have a tiny iron deposit in their beak between their nostrils that interacts with the Earth's magnetic core to orient them as to which direction is north. People with red hair tend to have a higher pain tolerance, a higher tolerance to pain medication, and bleed more than the average population. I'm a ginger. I needed a double dose of anesthesia when I went in for surgery. I could still feel everything. When going in for an emergency C-section, the doctor put the scalpel against me for the first cut and I said, "I feel that." 2 more doses to numb through an epidural. The anesthesiologist started to panic. And that's how I got an epidural and spinal block. There was one time that PepsiCo was one of the world's largest naval forces. The Soviet Union ran out of stock, and because their currency was void outside of their economy, they had to make a trade using naval vessels. Another similar one is that a Soviet general loved Coke, but knew drinking it publicly would demoralize his men due to it being a Western drink, so he commissioned a clear Coke to be contained in vodka bottles. Lastly, Fanta was made by the Nazis after they ran out of Coca-Cola syrup. It is actual Muppets canon that Kermit the Frog, in some way, had a role in bringing down the Twin Towers in the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. In a Muppets Christmas film released in late 2002, Kermit is shown a glimpse of what New York City might look like if he had never been born. Among the scenery of this alternate reality New York City, we find none other than the Twin Towers proudly standing in the background. They were, of course, long destroyed in Kermit's normal reality. And yet, in the world without Kermit, the war on terror is missing its powder keg spark. Who would have thought that green piece of fuck could commit a terror attack on US soil, but there it stands unimpeachable. We have concrete, canon proof of involvement. Why the world hasn't stopped and asked further questions is only further proof of a media cabal keeping this conversation away from the masses. The Twin Towers would still be standing if it weren't for Kermit the Frog. Al-Qaeda was the puppet this time, and Kermit the hand within. I feel like at this point this is known, but you know, that stinging feeling you get in your tongue when eating pineapple. That is because pineapple contains a certain chemical that digests meat. So basically when you eat pineapples they eat you back. The enzyme bromelain, to be precise. Fellas, is it gay to eat pineapple? At the end of the day, you're eating that bromelain. Did you know that the original name for Pac-Man was Puck-Man? You'd think it was because he looks like a hockey puck, but it actually comes from the Japanese phrase paku paku, which means to flap one's mouth open and closed. They changed it because they thought Puck-Man would be too easy to vandalize. You know, like people could just scratch off the P and turn it into an F, or whatever. Bees generate electricity because their wing flapping is so fast. They can use this to tell if a flower has been landed on by another bee already due at its electric charge. Bees are electric type Pokemon.